You are watching or listening to Purham and Associates. For more information, go to www.rpurham.com. Hey, good day to you all. Welcome to Permanent Associates. I'm your host. You know who I am. Hey, I hope you all had a great weekend and you stayed out of trouble and you did some fun and good stuff out there. We got a very special guest with us today. He's actually a returning guest and we haven't chatted in a while, so I'm excited to see what he's been up to in the last almost year. And we have none other than Richard Lyons. He is the author of actually two books here. He's the author of The DNA of Democracy, Volume 1, and The Shadows of Acropolis, Volume 2. And he was born and raised in the Midwestern United States. His education took him through Loyola Academy, the University of North Texas, and a graduate career at Southern Methodist University. Lyons has been a lifelong admirer of the written word, which has led him to literary pursuits as a poet, essayist, and screenwriter. Professionally, Lyon is a third-generation printer whose father dedicated his life to education in publishing and telecommunication fields. Lyons has been involved in printing, publishing, stage, and television production throughout his professional career. Ladies and gentlemen, introducing the some, presenting the others, Mr. Richard Lyons. Good day to you, sir. Welcome back.
Good to see you, Randy.
Yes, yes. So, tell us what you've been up to the last, 8 months or so since you've been on last. What's been
Well, a new volume came out. A new volume came out in the DNA of Democracy series. So there's now 3 volumes of the series. The first volume is how and why our country was put together constitutionally, based on the history of other democracies and republics. Volume 2 is how we strayed in the last 100 years and how and why our government has changed in that time. Volume 3 is actually a series of articles about the conflict between the growing socialism in America and its original principles.
Okay. Wow. Good deal. Good deal. We're gonna get into them. We're gonna get into them a little bit more here in a few minutes. I want to get your thoughts though on some foreign affair matters here.
Okay.
Ukraine. Talking about Ukraine here for a second. You know how last week President Vladimir Zelensky came over to the White House and they had that whole charade that went down with him, President Trump, and Vice President Vance. And then a few days later, he's like now all of a sudden ready to make a deal, with the whole minerals rights stuff that's going on there. I want to get your thoughts on like why the sudden flip flop after he went back over to Europe and he had a meeting with the UK Prime Minister Starmer and talked to the King, and he had a visit with French President Macron and everybody. I guess I'm assuming that they told him like, dude, you messed up, right? you might want to take this deal because we ain't finna help you. So,
well, I'm going to take you back one flip before where you started.
Okay.
On Thursday last week, it was agreed between our Treasury Secretary and the government of Ukraine that the mineral rights deal was approved by Ukraine, and that what was going to occur on Friday was merely a signing ceremony
Hmm.
Everybody would have lunch, and it would just be ceremonial. However, between the Thursday when there was the agreement on the mineral rights and the Friday when there was supposed to be the signing, Susan Rice and Chris Murphy, a senator of the United States, got into Zelensky's ear. And contrary to our commander in chief's foreign policy, directed him to reject the mineral rights deal in the Oval Office and to demand security guarantees, knowing that is the one thing, Randy, this country and Donald Trump cannot do. The minute we guarantee the security of Ukraine, we are at war with Russia. So it's something we cannot do. Susan Rice and Chris Murphy knew this, and they were directing him to follow something against U.S. foreign policy initiatives by our commander in chief. Yeah. So when he went into the meeting, he tried to relitigate the whole agreement in front of the media. So the Democrats prompted him to do this, hoping to embarrass Trump.
Yeah.
And you'll note that Chris Murphy and Susan Rice immediately went to friendly media outlets to say that Trump botched the whole deal.
Yeah.
Within minutes, in fact, because they knew this was going to happen.
Right. And I did. I did catch that.
It's what the Democrats did borders on treason. In our Constitution, Randy, the commander in chief, and there's a reason for this, and it's based on General Washington and his prosecution of the war against the British all those years ago. You have to have a unitary voice as commander in chief. There cannot be any deviation from that. So when you have a former official of the Biden administration and a senator of the opposing party telling a leader of a foreign nation to go against the policy of the United States, that borders on the treasonous. Yeah. So that brings us to that meeting where he was trying to litigate in front of the media, renegotiate the entire agreement agreed upon the day before. And it blew up in his face because he's not dealing with sleepy Joe Biden. Right. He's dealing with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump doesn't take this sort of mouthing off, so to speak.
Yeah. Exactly.
So they threw him out of the Oval Office, and then immediately because there's a personality conflict between Trump and Zelensky. So Zelensky goes to Britain and the king and prime minister and tries to save face there. I think in order to sign the mineral rights deal, which is the only possibility of peace for Ukraine, he will have to apologize to the Trump probably to the American people for having been an embarrassment in the Oval Office, which is the highest office in our country. Mm-hmm. And he might want to bring a suit and tie when he does that.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I never got that gimmick. I understood, the first year of the Ukraine-Russia war. I got it. He was coming over there, off the battlefield type of thing. And he's coming to the White House. I got it. He's putting on the stunt. Putting on the outfit. Okay, I understood that. But then it's like, okay, you're not actually actively, in the conflict, so you can kind of dress up a little bit, at least some khakis in a polo shirt, at very minimum. You're still coming over here. It's like, come on, dude. All right.
Get this, Randy. In that Oval Office was half of the cabinet of the United States.
Yes.
There was the Treasury Secretary. There was the Secretary of State. There was the Vice President, the President, the Secretary of Communications. All these people dressed to the tens, the best they can do because they are receiving the leader of a foreign nation. That's how you show respect. And he came in a pajama.
Yes.
And,
question for you. So, Chris Murphy, sitting senator of the United States.
Yes.
Got it. He's actively part of the federal government. And
yeah,
I was as you was talking about this, I was trying to remember the act. It's not the Hatch Act, but it's something related to where a person cannot negotiate on behalf of the United States in foreign policy.
That's correct. That's in the Constitution.
Right. I'm trying to remember what the name of that act is. It's escaping me right now, but that's essentially.
I think it's the Sedition Act. I think it's the Sedition Act.
It's something along those lines.
Yeah.
It was named after somebody. And I'm trying to
Okay.
remember. I'm trying to remember who it was or what it was. And ladies and gentlemen, if y'all remember who it is, drop it in the comments and correct me. I can't remember. I know what it is.
No, but
I can't remember.
you're exactly right, Randy. You're
Yeah.
exactly right.
So
It's
civil
not
right is
as
in
an
direct violation
individual.
of that. Yeah.
It is.
Mhm.
It's unconstitutional.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I'm surprised that it's still early, so they may be like looking to go after her for that because it was like, okay, you just directly violated federal law by doing this, and
Yes.
they could be trying to, it could be a touchy subject, and like, yeah, do we really want to, hit them
Well,
on this? But
Randy, this goes back to 2016 now,
yeah,
when the same Democrat Party was launching the Russia hoax.
yes,
And then you'll remember, as soon as the day after the Russia hoax ended,
hmm
Alexander Vindman accused Trump of
hmm
an impeachable offense involving whom? Ukraine.
Ukraine, yep,
The Democrats keep using this poor country as a pawn
hmm
in their willingness to defame President Trump and embarrass him.
yes.
This has been many, many years now, and
Yeah.
it really ought to stop.
Yes, I agree. I agree. And it's interesting that, Vindman actually got slammed for this just recently, just at the during the election cycle as well. So
Yeah.
it's crazy to me. Keeping on along these same lines here in this conversation, I want to get your thoughts about the efficacy of NATO in all of this. You got UK, you got France, telling Zelensky, hey, dude, you need to go back and fix this because
Yes.
we're not gonna be able to help you. But they're also at the same time trying to shore up defenses for Ukraine, and they're contributing a little bit more. But the overarching NATO apparatus is still kind of like, yeah, we just ain't got the money. We can't help
Well, no, well, there's a bigger problem, and that is
you.
that the ripe time for getting Ukraine into NATO was right after the fall of the Soviet Union,
Yeah,
when Yeltsin was in office. That would have been the perfect time because Russia was as weak as it's ever been in history.
yeah,
But that time passed. Now, Ukraine cannot now be a member of NATO because of Article 5 in NATO's
hmm
treaty agreement, which demands that, say, Russia invades France. Yes?
hmm
As a member of NATO, we have to come to the defense of France.
correct.
So Russia is okay that France is within NATO because France, there's a lot of area between France and Russia. Ukraine sits on Russia's southern border. It will not allow NATO armaments in Ukraine.
hmm
Uh, it simply is not a point that they will accept. So you can neither have a NATO membership for Ukraine, neither can you have a bilateral agreement with Ukraine that guarantees their security without putting America immediately at war with Russia. I mean, as in tomorrow.
hmm
So you can't have those two things. So what Trump has tried to do is create a diplomatically born commercial agreement with Ukraine, which is to say that it is a joint venture between the United States, the most powerful country in the world, and Ukraine regarding its rare earth minerals. And Russia is not going to attack commercial interests of the United States in Ukraine. So that is as much of a guarantee as Russia will allow and as can create a peace in Ukraine. So I think it's very deft of the Trump administration to have started this initiative. And it was very stupid of Zelensky and darn near treasonous of the Democratic Party to try and scuttle it.
Yeah. I think I think it was a way for the Democrats to try to score some political points going into the midterms.
Yes,
To say that,
exactly.
look, the Trump administration, they flailed on, they screwed up the Ukraine-Russia war. So
Yeah.
here you go, vote for us. We could get it back on track. I think that was the aim there, and they failed at that too. So I don't know what's going to happen there.
Well,
But
we hope, Randy, don't we? We hope. And
yeah,
and
yeah,
if they should better consider the idea of peace for Ukraine so that people in Ukraine can actually, live a peaceful life. They shouldn't be thinking, well, our first motivation is to embarrass the Trump administration in America through the American media. This is not a good motive.
You're right, Richard. And I would say I will further echo that with the sentiment of, for everybody that's running around with the Facebook icons and the lapel pins saying I stand with Ukraine, you should be also hoping that there is a peace agreement that comes to fruition. That way, these people can get their lives back together and they can stand and in peace.
Yes.
So
Yes.
instead of perpetuating this war and saying, oh well, let's continue to just give them money and weaponry to fight against Russia, it's like this not making any sense. It's been 4 years now,
Well,
and they're
Randy,
losing.
they can't win.
They can't
Ukraine
win.
cannot.
Yeah, it's not a winnable war.
It's
Exactly.
not a winnable war.
Yeah, and and
So,
to that point, Europe has been hands off in this war. If it was in the
yeah.
best interest for Europe for Ukraine to actually have won this war, they could have just gone all in and said, you know what, we're going to crush Russia by proxy of Ukraine and be done with this once and for all. But they have not done that.
Yeah.
Neither has the United States, for that matter. Although the United States has pumped in over $500 billion into the Ukraine market, the war market.
Yeah,
in
well,
Ukraine.
that's the total between the U.S. and Europe. So
Yes.
the United States has put in 350 billion. You have the figure right,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
Europe has put 150 billion.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
But they no troops on the ground,
Right.
and munitions, but nobody to man the munitions, so to speak. So it has been an effort for Ukraine to defend its territory without being involved in the conflict. But there have been so many Ukrainians and Russians dying in this, and it isn't going to end unless, it's very virtuous of the Trump administration and America to want to enter into an agreement that is as much of an agreement as we can get into without being at war overnight, without being in World War III overnight.
Right.
So, and that's when Trump was saying to Zelensky, you are gambling on creating World War III. That's what he meant. Because if we go further in this and do what he asks us to do, it'll launch a war between America and Russia.
Absolutely. And it's mind-boggling to me. And I spent 3 years in NATO, and ironically, my last year in NATO, I was part of the planning team. It was called a graduated response plan for Russia and Ukraine. So we actually predicted and was doing like the strategy planning in the event that Russia and Ukraine got into conflict, like literally 2 years before this all actually happened. So it was just kind of
Holy cow!
it's like holy
And then,
shit.
and then look how it all started. It was under Obama that they took Crimea,
Crimea, yes.
and under Biden they invaded again.
Yep.
And
yes, exactly.
so
Interesting.
let an administration actually solve the problem and bring peace and save lives to a region that apparently the Democrat Party treats as kind of a pawn. That they can go to the media and create, they can create impeachment processes against Trump, or they can try and embarrassment in him and his second administration. This is really, it's a malign motive that the Democrats have.
Yeah, yeah. No, I agree. All right, Richard. So, DNA of Democracy. Yeah, you don't know this, but I actually got your book.
Huh?
I actually have both of them. Yeah,
Okay, good.
and Shells of Acropolis. I got both.
That's great.
Yes,
Great.
and so I talk about the impetus of DNA of Democracy, like why you wrote it and what it's about for the audience.
Sure. Like a lot of your audience and like a lot of Americans back in 2010, I was wondering what was going on when I noticed that the IRS was attacking Tea Party organizations. And I noticed that the Health and Human Services Agency was actually suing the Little Sisters of the Poor because they were exercising their freedom of faith. And I noticed that the Obama administration was spying on reporters that didn't write articles that were approved by the Obama administration. So I noticed that there was a creep of socialism in our country, and I had to express how it happened. In order to do that, you have to go back to the building blocks of the country. So I had to go back to how and why our Constitution was made, why it had its form and why it had its protections, why it has the Bill of Rights, why are the separation of powers there. And so I had to go back into history and take all those episodes in history that became building blocks for our Constitution. So part of that is the Ten Commandments. Part of that is the Athenian Constitution. Part of that is the Roman Republic. Part of it is England's common law and the Magna Carta. And then I go into our revolution and how that was the liberation of mankind to create a novel constitution based on the individual having power over the government, not the government having power over the individual. So that is the DNA of democracy, and it runs right up to 1920. So it's the how and the women's suffragette movement. And so it's the how and why our country was created as it was, as the freest society in world history. Yeah. Then Shadows of the Acropolis starts right from where the DNA of democracy ends. Around 1920, Woodrow Wilson brought socialism and its ideals into American government by creating the unenumerated power of the administrative state. The administrative state. So for 100 years, from Woodrow Wilson to FDR to LBJ to Obama and Biden, socialism has been growing in America through the administrative state and through those agencies. And during the Obama administration in 2010, when he started using the DOJ, the FBI, the IRS, the HHS to attack persons that were his political opposition. And it continued in the first Trump administration with the DOJ, the FBI, the DNI, the CIA, creating the Russia hoax and using all the agencies of government to create a coup against a sitting president, and using the media as a useful propaganda tool. So the Russia hoax continued for 2 or 3 years. And the day the Russia hoax ended, there was Alexander Vindman and Ukraine to be used to impeach him. Yep. So then Trump was taken out of office, and I think it was not a fair election. I think they stuffed the ballot box in all of the toss-up states. So Trump is out of office, and what do? They act unconstitutionally and in a socialist manner to go after him through lawfare, to try and break him financially, try and break his family and friends, bankrupt his businesses, and put him in jail. And then, listening to all the propaganda, two persons try and assassinate him. Yeah. Because they believe he's Hitler. So this is what's been going on since 2010, Randy, and this is why I wrote the books. And it explains how and why our country was created and how and why it was changed over 100 years and how we have to go back to constitutional principles.
And, this is awesome. And, Richard, question for you, going to the framework of DNA of democracy and the separations of powers.
Yes.
Why is it that these activist judges think that they have the constitutional authority to create these injunctions against the current administration, President Trump particularly, on these executive orders and things that he's doing? And explain that mechanism there, because a lot of these constitutional experts are coming on TV and they're like, these judges can't do that. So
no, but it goes to a chapter in the Shadows of the Acropolis. During the FDR administration, one of his chief advisors was Felix Frankfurter. It's kind of a funny name, but his name was Felix Frankfurter. And he was a Harvard grad who believed in the administrative state, in the rule of the few experts over a country. So he was a big fan of Woodrow Wilson, like FDR. Felix Frankfurter ended up being and so he advised FDR how to grow and build the administrative state. And then he said, we can do something more. We can engage the judiciary to be like a flanker in defense of the growth of the administrative state. He became a Supreme Court justice, and through his office, everyone who clerked at the Supreme Court And that's where you want a clerk if you want to become a headline judge in America, a district judge, such as those who are annulling Trump's executive orders. What Frankfurter came up with was that the executive and the judiciary will create and defend the administrative state power. And they have been doing it since that administration. All the clerks that came into the Supreme Court had to be approved for decades by Felix Frankfurter. So they had to be activists. They had to be liberals. And then they spawned out throughout the American judicial system. And that's why you find them today defending the administrative state by annulling executive orders, which the executive branch has the right to do to reduce the administrative state. It is all a defense system set up back in the days of FDR to protect his administrative state.
Yeah, and I'm surprised. I'm surprised that Congress and and President Trump haven't just came together and just say, you know what, we just fit to eliminate the judiciary in that regard and be done with it. Be like, okay,
it's actually beneficial because all these things are going to end up at the Supreme Court, and there's going to be clarity as to who has what power. It's exactly what you said, Randy. It's the separation of powers.
Right.
And they're going to discover that he had, and then by acts of rescission, I think after the budget's done, the Congress is going to take up acts of rescission. So everything Elon Musk is doing is going to be codified in law and applicable to the budget. And so that will be by Congress, their approval against the judiciary, activist judiciary. So that'll be good to see. It'll be great.
Yes, and I believe that President Trump has the authority to correct me if I'm wrong here, but I read and then I also heard by way of another judge talking to him that President Trump actually has the authority, or Congress rather, has the authority to recall through a kind of like an impeachment bout way of these very activist judges through the budgetary process, basically shutting down these particular offices. Is that some kind of thing, if you will?
Well, I think the administration is going to find blockades going and doing what they're doing because, Randy, it's never been done before.
Yeah.
In 100 years, the budget has never been reduced. In 100 years, no agency created in the administrative state, the unelected, unenumerated power of the administrative state, no agency has been reduced or denied or written out of existence. Yeah. It has all been creation and growth, more and more agencies, more and more expansive budgets for them to do whatever they want. And you can see when they get to do what they want, what happened at the EPA when it gave $20 billion out to a Citibank account, of which $2 billion went to Stacey Abrams, to a company that had $100 in the bank. They received $2 billion and were told they have to spend the money before Trump gets in office.
Yep.
I mean, this is what we're dealing with.
Yeah.
So it's a virtuous cause we're on, Randy.
Crazy. Richard, Richard, thank you for being here. I appreciate your wisdom and your input and insight. It's always a pleasure. Tell people where they can share any final thoughts you have, and tell people where they can follow you and support you, sir.
Well, they can find me at richardclyons.com. It's a website that describes the works. They can find the books at Amazon or at any retail outlet if they ask for it, or the Barnes & Noble site on the internet. And thank you for having me, Randy. Your show is very important on these topics.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And be safe out there, and I'll catch you soon. And
okay, great.
Yeah, thank you again. Appreciate it. Take care.
Okay, Randy. Thank you.
Right. Bye-bye. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard C. Lyons, and like he just said, you can go to his website, richardclyons.com. It's right there in the banner here below, richardclyons.com, and pick up his two books, DNA of Democracy and the Shadows of Acropolis. And like I said, I have them both right here. I will be honest. He knows I haven't started because I just got them right here. Get them both. I can't wait to get into them based on the explanation. I anticipate getting into them. Y'all know I am a reader, a junkie, a book junkie, and I love these kind of things, especially historical context when it comes to stuff like this. So I look forward to getting into that. But great discussion, and it gives, and he provides some great insights as to what's going on in our excuse me, great insights as to what's going on, and not only in our country, but as in relation to the affairs matters that are going on around the world right now. And like I said, like I was telling Richard here a minute ago, when I worked in NATO, my last 3 years in the military, in Naples, Italy, I worked one of the projects was working in the G5. There was called it was the graduated. The project was a graduated response plan. It was a taken off the shelf, dust off type of thing. Hey, guys, look at how to create, work on the operations for any event that Russia and Ukraine get into a war. It wasn't framed as Russia invading Ukraine. It was Russia and Ukraine going to war. And we like, this is random. Quite what it literally quite was. But by my background being CBRN, I was called up, and there was only 4 of us in the office, so I was tasked to be part of that team of planners to deal with that. And so I identified all of the facilities, CBRN, chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear related facilities throughout the Ukrainian country, and identify the hazards within, the vulnerabilities, all that kind of stuff. I ain't gonna get into all that right now, but that was my job. And so identifying all that, and also like other things related to the battlefield preparation. We call IPB, intelligence preparations of the battlefield. And so doing all of that, and subsequently, it was only like working on that project for a few months, and then I left that alone and went on to do other things. And eventually it was time for me to retire, and then COVID hit, and yeah, so the story goes. And so I'm very, very familiar with the landscape of all of that. And it was just ironic that a couple years later it happens. It's like, well, shit. But anywho, so long story short, it's crazy out there, folks. It's crazy. But anyways, I'm gonna jump up out of here, and I will catch you all on Friday. God willing, God bless. Be safe, and I hope you all enjoyed today's show. Don't forget to comment, like, share, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And please go to richardclyons.com, pick up his books, check it out if you enjoy it. Drop him a note, all that good stuff. I'm all about sharing the wealth of knowledge, information, and yeah. So holla, be safe. See you Friday. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in today. Please be sure to follow, like, subscribe, and share, and go to rpurham.com for more information. See you all soon. Take care. God bless.